Not even a single mosquito is spared because even one mosquito bite can cause malaria. Mortein Insta knocks down mosquitoes 2 times faster.
All right, welcome back. Time to, of course, appreciate all of you once again for staying tuned to Good Morning Nigeria always. We're moving now to business news where more advocacies have been made for entrepreneurs to take advantage of technology to aid recovering from the coronavirus pandemic impact. Let's join our business desk for details of this and more.
As consumer needs change with the impact of coronavirus pandemic, experts are encouraging businesses and firms to evolve ways of approaching the new normal while scaling their skills to stay afloat by leveraging on technology. Also, key players suggest that businesses take advantage of organic certified goods that have competitive advantage in the international market, such as ginger, turmeric, hibiscus, sesame, and soya bean, while building digital skills and innovative ways of boosting sales.
For people who want to go into export of agricultural commodities into the international market, they need to understand first what the territories that they want to export their products to. In terms of having market intelligence, they have to understand Incoterms, which are the different terms used for export, because for every contract that you get, there are Incoterms that you need to understand, and then you also need to understand the maximum residue level of the country that you want to export your product to, so that you don't invest money and then the product gets rejected. And you also need to understand the standards that the product that you want to export requires to get into that market.
And trades on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange closed positive after today's session.
We thank you, Chimobi, for that business package. And on Good Morning Nigeria, we'll go ahead now to bring you newspaper review.
Okay, Bayo is here. Bayo, good morning.
Good morning, Claire. How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Good to see you.
Same
Good
here.
morning, Kirian. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, but it's good to see you today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And let's begin with the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper. Above the nameplate, we have 3 headlines there. First, 12 pilots evicted after police siege to Abuja hotel. It's on page 28. Police probe dirty fight between Ohakim and the woman. It's on page 5. Fleeing bandits behind crime in Nasarawa, says governor. The story is also on page 28. Now, below the nameplate, Edo Ondo 2020, that's the kicker. Okumbol to citizens, our dream state is possible. PDP fueling religious tension in Edo, alleges APC. INEC, we are ready for peaceful election. Teachers endorse governor for re-election. More on that you can get on page 7 of the Nation newspaper. Federal government plans 3.1 trillion naira for debt servicing in 2021. It's on page 5. And then the Prime Minister arrested in Mali mutiny. That's on page 5. You can see the photograph of the Malian president, Keita, there. Now, the lead story this morning on the Nation newspaper is that 774,000 public works jobs. PDP lawmakers reject slots. 774,000 public works jobs. PDP lawmakers reject slots. We had to add to that. Minister allocation and mere privilege. Nigerians will be beneficiaries. And of course, below the photo story there, Buhari governors mourn as Wada Meda is laid to rest. And at the bottom of the newspaper, it said 4 headers charged with terrorism in Benue. It's on page 6. COVID-19 stories, of course, on the table can be found on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. That's all about the headlines here this morning on Nation newspaper. Claire.
Okay, I have the Daily Sun, and its lead story, it's on COVID-19 lockdown, and it reads, "We are broke," attributed to the governors. The writers speak for themselves. States can't pay salaries, meet other obligations. And the second one says, seek 67.2 billion naira bailout from federal government. So that's the lead story, COVID-19 lockdown. We are broke, says governors. And the picture story, President Muhammadu Buhari there, receiving briefing from Special Envoy on Mali crisis and former President Dr. Ebele Goodluck Jonathan in Abuja yesterday. And the story to that effect is just at the right column, which will be to your left. Coup in Mali, ECOWAS, US, France condemn action, and details of that story, it's on page 8. Okay, let me come down again to the bottom of the picture story. Stories trending at the foot of the paper. You find NBA, that's a Bar Association confab. Lawyers threaten boycott over choice of El Rufai as speaker. Odinkalu, others lead protest against Kaduna governor. You can find the details of that on page 26. And the NGA, Kalu, others, Man Wada Meida, on page 26 as well. Let me also bring you some stories trending on the right column. Carrington offered me U.S. asylum in 1995 before Abacha arrested me, attributed to former President Obasanjo on page 6. Now, blasphemy. Sharia Council backs death sentence for Kano singer. Asks Ganduje to execute judgment immediately. It's on page 6. And just on the right topmost part of the paper, where you find the name caption, NLC vows to expose people playing politics with lives of Nigerians. Okay, that's the outlook of the Daily Sun and the Nation bio. So
well,
let's
start
get
with
on.
a picture of former President Goodluck Jonathan briefing President Muhammadu Buhari. You will recall that he is the special envoy for the crisis in Mali. Incidentally, just as he was briefing the president by the early hours of today, it has been announced that the president of Mali, Keita, has resigned. There are also indications that the prime minister has been detained by soldiers and what appears like a mutiny or a coup in that place. In the meantime, the ECOWAS, the African Union, and even France have all opposed the development in that country. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed profound shock over what he described as the sudden death of Malam Madawaida at age 70. The statement by the Presidential Media Publicity Assistant says that Malam Madawaida, former press secretary, while he was head of state between 1983 and 1985, is a man who possessed highest quality of professional integrity in his journalism career. The tribute says his passion he brought to bear on his job accounted for his success and attainment to the pinnacle of excellence in his career. The president has condoled the Governor Masari of Katsina State, the Wadameda family, as well as people of Katsina, and also the management and staff of the News Agency of Nigeria, where he was chairman of board before he died on Monday. He has been buried. It will be recalled that after he left being press secretary to the then head of state, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, he became the managing director of News Agency for several years. After that, he left, and he was instrumental to the establishment of the 2 newspapers, Daily Trust and People's Daily. He, in fact, before he died, he was a board member of the International Press Institute. May his soul rest in peace. In the area of COVID-19, by way of statistics, we have 410 new cases in 16 states. Again, like we reported yesterday, Lagos has shot beyond 100 cases again. And that shows that although the Commissioner of Health in Lagos had indicated that Lagos has reached its peak and was beginning to descend down the cliff. Apparently, it looks as if the cases are going on ascendancy. So far, we have 49,895 cases. Those that have been discharged from COVID-19 treatment are 37,051. They're told there were 4 yesterday. That has bring a total tally of fatalities to 981. Meanwhile, COVID-19 pandemic has gripped the world, but a cleric in Akure is the cleric of Kingdom of Heaven on Earth. His name is Oluwatamole Agai. He says there are signs that COVID-19 is coming to an end. He says that there was a rainbow around the sun which showed around the world recently, and that is a positive indication that God has come down and COVID-19 will soon end. Meanwhile, on the scientific front, hope for vaccine has increased, and the EU has reached out for the agreement for 300 million doses of vaccine when it is available. They are already booking in advance. You recall that Russia had indicated that they have announced a vaccine. India, on its Independence Day, also indicated that they are working on possibility of 2 vaccines. So the EU has made the purchase on behalf of its 27 member countries. If it becomes a reality, then we are going to have a possible inoculation against COVID-19.
They are purchasing vaccines that are yet to be produced.
They are booking in advance.
Working in advance. But let me tell you what the WHO head said. You know, WHO is saying that we should be careful with the issue of having a vaccine nationalism, right? Because he was
I wonder what that meant.
No, what he meant is this. Remember when the COVID-19 emerged, countries became nationalistic about it. First of all, when it comes to the personal protective equipment, some nations hoarded such equipment and refused to even sell to other nations. I recall that America, particularly at a point, it did not want to sell to any other country. And so it was China that was, good enough, generous enough to also, send to many parts of the country, especially countries where they have businesses. So that was what happened. So he's saying that if this vaccine comes out, that we should be generous about it. People should know, like the EU has already paid for the 27 countries, which means that if you come from an EU country, before it leaves EU to any other part of the world, of course, they must have, made sure that all the EU member nations and their citizens must have been inoculated before they can allow any vaccine to leave the EU. So that's what he's saying, that it's not good enough. And it was one of the reasons why the pandemic, escalated, because we were so nationalistic about it. That's what he meant by vaccine nationalism.
Yeah. Well, you can't run away from vaccine nationalism. Every nation is striving to protect its citizens.
Exactly.
So if there is you find a therapy or a cure or a protection elsewhere, every nation will rush to it.
Exactly.
The danger here, however, is that the commercialism that is being introduced into it, so much so that some parts of the world are discrediting other parts of the world because they are not the one who are coming up with the possible vaccines.
Yes.
We live in one world. There is a pandemic which is challenging all the world. If there is a possibility of a vaccine, accept it, test it, and make sure that it has potency and where it comes from.
Exactly.
And the issue of making it a national thing is another matter. Like Russia last week or 2 weeks ago said, look, they have come up with something. And the rest of the world, I'm not sure every nation acknowledged that in terms of the authenticity of what they have. Because many nations said, look, that has not been properly tested. Even when Russia has said, look, they have passed 3 stages of testing.
In fact, President Putin said that it has been administered on his daughter, and the daughter is doing fine. But even in Russia itself, some medical experts have said they cannot vouch for the integrity of that vaccine. Again, it's part of the international politics.
Yes, and the business is this. There are over 100 pharmaceutical companies across the globe that are working on this vaccine.
So,
right.
If somebody comes out now, it will undermine their own...
Okay, let me change this narrative. Yeah. I want to talk about the issue of the rainbow bio. The rainbow that you mentioned about, the biblical narratives, on the rainbow, of course, would indicate, the supreme God remembering his covenant with man, and of course his anger receding thereof, wherein he promised not to destroy the world, and all that. But there are those who don't believe in that.
Well, it's not scientific. The scientific explanation for a rainbow is that light coming from the atmosphere passes through a prism-like environment, and therefore it occasions a dispersal of light. And that is what you have colors in roid beef: red, orange, indigo, violet, that you call rainbow. So that is the scientific explanation.
That has always been the case. So the issue of likening that rainbow to the pandemic is not. I don't understand that.
Everyone according to their faith and what they believe.
That's a spiritual aspect of it.
Yes,
right? But I wonder how the pastor got to know that this rainbow can be seen across the globe. You know, he's in Nigeria here. So how is he sure that he's in people in America will see the rainbow? Because if he says that the rainbow across the world, that is, people can see it across the world, then of course we might agree that God is responding to the issue of COVID-19.
Two critical stories about criminality. You recall that there is, in Oyo State, there was persistent killing in Akinyele local government. The man who was responsible for killing about five persons had been arrested. He was paraded July 7th, but unfortunately, he's said to have escaped from police custody. But meanwhile, 2 policemen are to appear in ordinary room trial. They are being held accountable for the escape of the man. The Commissioner of Police, Peter Nwonu, has indicated that they will make sure they find out where these people are. The Inspector General of Police and the Oyo State House of Assembly has also insisted that that guy has to be fetched up. The other area is in Kaduna State. An NGO by name Coalition of Northern Groups says that it has resolved to establish a non-governmental organization to accommodate all stakeholders and find a lasting solution. And they have put a finger on what they think is the causes of the crisis in the southern Kaduna. They say it is bad politics, economic realities, as well as government action perceived as positive or negative as a factor responsible for the current crisis. They have now setting up 2 committees to try and see how they can interface with all stakeholders.
And by the way, we understand that Evans have also been sentenced. Did you hear that?
Well, not quite, but I think in the initial case was that Evans had a case that he had no case to answer. He has lost that, and what that entails is that he now has to prepare for his defense. And at the last count, what I was following up, he had no counsel. So when they came to court, the judge tasked the Lagos State government to provide him with counsel for his defense.
Okay, the editorial bio and Kieran today is on how to solve petroleum import and export mess. That's according to the editorial on The Punch. And the crux of this editorial is, and I want to read, it says, it is time to dust off the petroleum industry reform. The federal government should sell the refineries and encourage the private sector to invest more in the refinery and subsector so that the country will not have to depend so much on one refinery. There are 38 proposed modular refineries with capacity ranging from, these are some technical figures there.
Well, the challenge is known to every Nigerian. Sadly, the editorial points out that Nigeria is one of the open exporting countries, and unfortunately, crudely, we export petrol abroad and crudely import petrol 100%. And this he has attributed to the fact that our 4 refineries have not worked. He also alluded to the fact that in 2015, President Muhammadu Buhari had actually promised that they will try and reservice the refineries and get them working. You will also recall that when the current GMD resumed, he gave indication that before 2023, they will see what they can do to bring the refineries on stream. And there was a lot of hope that by the beginning of this year, the refinery being built by Dangote will come on stream, and it will also reduce our preponderancy of importing fuel. The editorial is happening on the fact that there is something has to be done about refinery. But the positive indications are that private refinery is coming up gradually from Lagos. There are approvals for modular refineries also coming up. In fact, one of them was followed up by the Minister of Petroleum Resources, the Minister just over last week.
Bayo, you have exhausted your
Sorry,
time.
he has exhausted, really.
Yes.
But when you talk about modular refineries, we started hearing about this during the Obasanjo administration, way back in 1999, when he awarded, gave us seven corporate bodies, the certificate, to start modular refineries. That has, up to today, I'm not sure any of them is functioning. But talking about our 4 refineries in the country, right? Someone made the comment that, look, one of the refineries in Texas, you know, it's been there for over 60 years and it's still functional. So the possibility of reversing the trend in our own four refineries is there. It depends on the will. But if the president has promised to do that, well, we're hoping that before 2023 that something can be done. Because it's ironical, you know, that you are importing, you know,
Are you taking more of Bio's time?
No,
Bios
we are,
has
you know,
exhausted his time.
no,
So
I'm
Bios-
just
Add
reminding him.
that Ghana refinery established before our own is still functional
Exactly.
today.
Bio, we'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow
All
will be
right, this
another
is
day.
Good
Thank
Morning
you.
Nigeria. Don't go away. When we come back in a short moment, we'll start our conversation.
The United Nations is 75. When we come together and discuss our priorities as a human family, we can build a better future for all. Join the conversation. UN 75 online.
NTA TV College Jos, an affiliate of Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, is currently admitting students for its ordinary diploma programs in television journalism, television production, and television engineering. Interested candidates are advised to obtain relevant information concerning eligibility at our website at www.ntatvc.edu.ng or marketing department of any NTA station nationwide. For further information, contact Assistant Director, Marketing, NTA TV College Jos on 0803-314-4383 or the Academic Office of the College on 0806-980-9807. Announcer, Registrar.
Smartphone Network. You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Our conversation this morning is on humanitarian services day 2020 amid COVID-19. And the steady tone for the real conversation this morning is a background put together by Aisha Ubali.
In 2019, about 12 humanitarian workers were killed in the northeastern part of the country for their selfless work and their belief in core human values. This is twice the number of aid workers killed in 2018. 2020, with the ravaging coronavirus pandemic, the country between May and July witnessed the attacks and killing of some other 5 aid workers. With a spike in insecurity issues, banditry, kidnapping, as well as communal clashes, there have been an increased displacement of people with devastating impact on women, girls, many children orphaned in several cases, property destroyed, collapsed infrastructure and basic services in parts of the country, forcing an increasing demand for humanitarian services. Various organizations and partners, both local and foreign, in charge of humanitarian support are trying to complement government efforts by addressing short-term and long-term needs of affected persons with food, medicines and medical instruments, as well as skill acquisition towards improving their livelihood in different regions of the country. However, lack of access to some locations due to mounting insecurity has been a major challenge for so many humanitarian workers. Some of these workers have also become soft targets for terrorists. With the coming on board of the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, there is hope that the humanitarian needs of Nigerians will be met. Already, the ministry is doing a lot in terms of humanitarian aid to affected Nigerians. The ministry has also been up on its feet during the current COVID-19 pandemic by assisting many Nigerians with palliatives. Today, being World Humanitarian Day, guest on Good Morning Nigeria will be looking at some of these humanitarian issues and much more in accelerating humanitarian services.
Okay, just a reminder, it's World Humanitarians Day. So let me quickly introduce our guests here in the studio to discuss, and we're talking all about humanitarian services. I have Group Captain Sadiq Garba Show. He's, of course, retired. He's a technical advisor to the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development here in Abuja. Thank you very much, Group Captain, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. We also have here in our Abuja studio the District Governor-elect, Rotary International District 9125, here with us. Let me welcome the District Governor-elect, Ayo Uyedokun. Thank you very much for joining.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
And joining us via Zoom, we have the Executive Director, Victim Support Fund, VSF, Professor Sunday Ochoche. A familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. Prof, thank you once again for being part of our show today.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, gentlemen, it's good to have you on this very special occasion. I would want to see the Humanitarian Day 2020 as a very special one because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is ravaging the whole globe. And in every nation, some group of persons or sections of populations actually require some level of humanitarian aid. And on that premise, may I now ask the Rotarian here, whose organization is synonymous with humanitarian services, to let us know how the Humanitarian Day 2020 is playing out, not just from the Rotary point of view, but globally.
All right, thank you very much once again. Good morning, Nigerians. Today is the World Humanitarian Day, which is set aside to honor the fallen heroes of those that carry out humanitarian services all around the world. And we all know that this year's Humanitarian Day is very unique because of the situation of the world at large right now. We have the COVID-19 pandemic that has been affecting a lot of humanitarian activities all around the world. And therefore, we have devised means in which we can still continue carrying out our humanitarian services despite the pandemic, but in all ways that will secure the lives of those that are in the forefront of humanitarian services. Like for Rotary, we know that we carry out advocacy. We're also on the front lines in ensuring that we continue to provide palliatives to people. And also, we have the support we normally give to government concerning immunization efforts. So all these things are still going on, but we are all doing all this in the utmost safety that we can do such humanitarian interventions.
All right, thank you for your opening remarks. Let me also bring in the Executive Director, Victim Support Fund, VSF, Professor Sunday Ochoche. Prof, joining us via Zoom, if you're there, I'm wondering what the global conversation around the work that you do is at the moment with specific focus on Nigeria. In terms of outcome, is it rewarding or has it been traumatic for all humanitarian workers?
Thank you so much. As you well know, the humanitarian challenges in Nigeria have been on the increase. The insecurity, especially in the Northeast, has thrown up so much need, so many humanitarian challenges. The number of IDPs we have in Nigeria right now run into millions. The insecurity was abating at some point, but it looks like we are far from being out of the wood. And we have a situation where the fluidity and the instability of the situation is daily increasing. The desperation also of the terrorists, appears to be increasing, and that is manifesting in the violence with which they attack humanitarian workers. And of course, with the coming of this COVID-19 pandemic, it further complicates everything. Where the needs are multiplying, the risk to humanitarian workers is increasing. The means to meet these needs don't appear to be measuring up to the demand that is out there. And it is calling, putting so much pressure on everybody to devise more skillful way of managing the situation, but also so much concern even for the humanitarian workers, the safety of the humanitarian workers. I'm sure many of us will have watched the videos and so on of the massacre of a number of the people who were taken. No family, no nation, no community will want to see those. And the psychological effect on people who are working, no matter how determined and how committed they are to the work, is significant. And across the world, yes, there are challenges that are increasing. And sadly, for where we are as a nation generally, when global pandemics, when challenges increase, and we are part of the challenge, because of the general socioeconomic marginalization of our continent, we will always tend to be pushed further back in the in the interventions that are required. And so, yes, the situation in Nigeria is getting more pressing, and the demand is getting more pressing, and the need to do things more quickly is also increasing.
All right, let's return to Abuja here, where we have Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu, technical advisor to the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. Let's share with you what the experience has been, not just since the COVID-19 pandemic, but overall, when it comes to humanitarian services in Nigeria. Of course, we've been on it ever before the emergence of COVID-19. So let's get to what the experience has been vis-a-vis the day that we are celebrating today globally.
Yes, thank you very much. The World Humanitarian Day is very important to all the humanitarian community. Bring it back home to Nigeria. The day has a double significance for us because it also coincides with the 1-year anniversary of the ministry that is dedicated for humanitarian services in Nigeria. That is the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, which was created by President Muhammad Buhari on 21st of August 2019. So given that, just as has been said by other guests, humanitarians go out when there is risk, when there is danger, because somebody has to take care of somebody. At the ministry, where we have all the agencies under us, like NEMA, like NE, Northeast Development Commission, like NAPTIP, like the Committees for Commission for Refugees and Migrants and Displaced Persons. In all honesty, while other sectors of the government might even take a way back because of the COVID pandemic, the COVID pandemic has been the most, most challenging time for people of the ministry, because we had to go back and continue our work of providing succor to those people who are there. As a ministry, we've had a lot of outreaches to commemorate this day and also to commemorate our first year anniversary. We've been involved as part of the presidential task force, where the Honorable Minister is a member. We have been leveraging on the federal government efforts for the COVID-19 response. But also, as a ministry, we also have our own mandate, which or without COVID, there are some humanitarian aspects of the work we do. At the ministry, we specifically lay emphasis on the vulnerable groups and the persons of care. This include IDPs, refugees, migrants, elderly, because in normal situations, these are people that could easily be forgotten while issues are being discussed. So we make sure that these people are factored in, and we have been having outreaches. The minister has been all over the country, visiting these persons of concern and making sure that they are not forgotten in the scheme of things.
Okay, let me, Captain, let me retract a bit and ask you to probably give us a sense of understanding of how the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management is pretty new, as you have indicated. It's 1 year. You're also marking 1 year today, you said. So give us a sense of how this aspect of services, humanitarian services, started. What were the objectives, and how do we situate the relevance of your ministry within it?
Prior to the creation of the ministry, in all honesty, there are government ministries, departments, and agencies that part of their mandate has to do with humanitarian services. Because honestly, you'll find that humanitarian assistance is interministerial, interdisciplinary. As you can see from the COVID response, this is a response now that involves ministries of health, humanitarian affairs, environment, aviation. So you can see when a disaster strikes, definitely there are many actors that will, apart from the government actors, there are non-governmental actors. What was lacking before is a ministry that is dedicated to the services of humanitarian affairs. So the president, in his wisdom, decided to create this ministry with the aim of coordinating whole of government approach to humanitarian, disaster management, and social development issues. So with this ministry in place now, it becomes very easy to interface with both the government agencies and also out-of-government agencies like United Nations agencies, development partners, NGOs, both local and international. So this is what the role that the ministry is going to.
I actually wanted you to give me a historical background, of the, inception. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Of the humanitarian day
yes,
itself.
Yes.
So, okay.
Because today is World Humanitarian Day.
Yes, the World Humanitarian Day emanated in 2009. That was when the United Nations, dedicated this day to celebrate humanitarian workers who are risking their lives to save this. Before that, in 2003, in Iraq, the UN's Secretary General Representative Javier de Mello was killed in a bomb attack in Iraq on 19th of August 2003. It killed him with 21 others. So based on that, the United Nations decided that there are thousands and thousands of people that are risking their lives every day, and a day has to be dedicated to commemorate this day. So from 2009 to now, this is the 11th year. Each year, 19th of August is dedicated to commemorate these people all over the world, by governments, by UN agencies. Here in Nigeria, probably because there was no any ministry dedicated to that, I want to believe this is the first time that this thing is brought into focus internationally. Like yesterday, the minister hosted a joint press briefing with all the humanitarian actors to commemorate this day. Now, we should not be talking of figures. We should be talking of numbers back from here in Nigeria. Because of the COVID-19, for example, according to NCDC, about 812 health workers have been infected with the disease. These are people who could have chosen to remain at home, and not render assistance, but they have to come back. Also, if we remember, sadly, like my friend from Rotary said, just June this year, we had 5 aid workers, including a worker that was working with Borno State Emergency and Management Agency, who were gruesomely executed by the Boko Haram. So
at the moment, with the dynamics of COVID-19, the addition, what are the key humanitarian needs, of Nigeria at the moment?
Well, the humanitarian needs have always been the same: shelter, food, good accommodation, sometimes clothing. But what exacerbated it is this COVID-19, because people who go out to earn their living, they are now deprived because of the lockdown, because it is a battle between livelihood and lives. Do you go for livelihood or do you go for, it's a very delicate balance. So these are the things that have exacerbated. And like I said, like people that are in IDP camps, migrants, even people that are returnees from other countries, people that are victims of trafficking, sometimes you find that during such responses, they are forgotten. So the ministry tries to, the ministry tries to lay emphasis on these people, to make sure that, they are taken care. So if you see what the ministry has been involved, apart from being member of the presidential task force, we were, saddled by the federal government with the task of distributing palliatives to all the states of the Federation, and this has been achieved so far by about 90%. We have also been tasked with continuing the school feeding program. Like, you know, the school feeding program, many people raise question of why school feeding program when COVID is there. The issue is this: it is unanimous by health and child care experts that when a child is growing, good nutrition is very necessary for mental and physical development. Now, most of the children that are benefiting from this school feeding program, some of them, they are from very poor backgrounds. The only place where they get their nutrition, which they need for physical and mental growth, was during the school feeding, during normal times. Now with the COVID, schools were closed. The president, in his wisdom, said that, well, schools are closed, but the nutritional needs of these children still continues because they are still growing. And if a certain age, the experts are unanimous, if a certain age, a child is deprived of nutrients, in all honesty, that would give birth to idiots, mental idiots, moral idiots. You see a child of 6 years, but his mental capacity is like that of a 2-year-old. So the president tasked the ministry to find ways of tracing the children to their homes and continue to feed them. Because the only investment that a nation has is for its future leaders. If we allow ourselves to have children that are maldeformed or malnourished because of the COVID-19, it will not go well for the country.
Yes, why many Nigerians have to criticize that aspect of what you just explained, yes, feeding the children while at home, because of the logistics, of course, tracing the children from home to feed them and all of that may be very, very cumbersome. Yeah, well, because from what you have said, it does seem that it was not very difficult for you to do, and that's appreciated. We thank you for that. And right now, let's go to the Rotary man with us here. How can we strategically, prioritize our humanitarian response plan during this COVID-19?
Okay, thank you very much. In addition to what the group captain said, the humanitarian crisis needs to be addressed. What actually leads to all these humanitarian crises? We know that political unrest is one of such factors. We know that the increased rate of poverty is one of those factors. We also know that the communal crises that are brewing all around are these things that lead to humanitarian crisis apart from the natural disaster. So when we are able to address some of all these situations that lead to our humanitarian crisis, then we can be able to reduce the rate of increase of the interventions that is needed. And what areas can we intervene? Like he has rightly said, there's so much humanitarian interventions that has been going on. We also, as an humanitarian service organization, think that education is one of the areas in which we can help curb this humanitarian crisis. Why did I say that? When there's lack of peace, definitely it will lead to crisis. So we as Rotary has come up with the education of individuals. We have 7 areas of focus, and one of the areas of focus is peace and conflict resolution and prevention, in which that we try to educate the people, that there's no need to fight, there's no need to war against one another. So we have scholars that help to prevent cases in which would lead to crisis, where we now be having displaced individuals, when we now have people that are being trafficked. So when we're able to arrest that route, I think we'll be able to prevent more of these humanitarian services that needs to be carried out. However, in our own perspective, we support government by helping provide water, for children. We also help provide school education, literacy, basic literacy and education for them, so that when they are knowledgeable about all the things that needs them to prevent peace, from not existing in their society, I think we'll be able to address, the increased humanitarian interventions that needs to be done.
Okay, we'll come back to, for you to give us your strategy, approach, because humanitarian services is not just something you just do. There must be targeted approach, at targeted people. But let me bring in the Professor Ochoche here, and I'm wondering, from research, we understand that the Nigeria's humanitarian response strategy plan puts the data of those in dire need of humanitarian services at nearly 8 million people, of course, comprising, women, children, men, boys, and all that. I'm wondering, what is the dynamics that COVID-19, has introduced in these in the humanitarian needs of Nigerians?
Thank you so much. As some of my colleagues already said, there are a lot of factors that generate these humanitarian needs. The security situation is very, very critical to it. And generally, the state of poverty is so critical to generating a lot of the humanitarian crises that we have. So we already had insecurity that was endangering a lot of us, especially in the Northeast. As we are aware, we now have serious crises in the Northwest and the North Central part of Nigeria. The banditry and insurgency appears to be spreading well beyond the Northeast, and therefore displacing people. And as people are displaced, they are also disconnected from their traditional roots. They are disconnected from their means of production. And with that, poverty begins to increase, all the needs begin to increase. Now, COVID-19 came with a major health challenge. The federal government had to respond accordingly. And in particular, at the beginning, when it had to lock down a number of the states that were affected, the level of poverty in Nigeria, we know so much that majority of Nigerians who are working are daily workers. They survive, sustenance economic activities they are involved with, daily work and daily income. The lockdown in COVID suddenly took that away. There was no warning, and these are people with ordinarily no savings. These are people with nothing down there, to resort to in times of need. At the best of times, they are already in serious need. The poverty level in Nigeria is very high, very serious for majority of Nigerians. And so COVID came. It came with the health challenge itself, and with it, with social lockdown, with economic lockdown, and so many Nigerians suddenly locked up with no food, with no water, with nowhere to go. And then, of course, there are the social factors of congestion in many of our urban centers in particular. And so people are just locked up. With that, we are needs for food in particular. And this is what has led to a lot of the need for many agencies, including the government and my agency, the Victim Support Fund, to respond to the call by the federal government, to agencies to provide palliatives to the people in need. And VSF responded accordingly by setting up a task force on COVID-19 to help provide palliatives. And across the country, we targeted Borno State, Yobe State, Adamawa State, Taraba State, the FCT, Ogun State, Lagos State, Ebonyi State, Enugu State, Ekiti State. These were all states that were targeted specifically because of the COVID-19 and the consequences of the lockdown and people not having access to their means of livelihood and the implications of that for nutrition, for food. And so across these states, we mobilized and procured a lot of palliatives of food and protective issues, sanitizers, face masks, and so on. We targeted over 60,000 households across this across these states. So the lockdown itself, the palliative itself increased the needs. And of course, given the state of our health, of our health services, which was recognized by the chairman of the task force, the SSG himself, said the situation was really bad. Apart from supporting citizens directly in the communities, We also had to support agencies that were responsible for support for carrying out the health needs. And so, for example, the NCDC that is critical to a lot of the coordination around the pandemic, we had to step in to provide state-of-the-art communication facilities for their headquarters that link them up to their different offices so that they are able to have right up-to-date information and communicate with offices, which has significantly increased their capacity, to respond. We are also in the process of setting up testing centers for some states that don't have. In particular, we are targeting Kogi State and Cross River states to provide testing centers because testing is also very, very critical to responding appropriately to the pandemic. So yes, the pandemic created new, and many agencies, including the Victim Support Fund, responded accordingly beyond what we are traditionally doing to the new dynamics created in the provision of palliatives and providing support to the agencies that are responsible for managing the process.
Let me first of all appreciate him, for these explanations that he made. It does appear that the Victim Support Fund is a strategic establishment that has a grasp of what this situation is all about. Because from the targeted states you mentioned, and of course the 60,000 families you said you targeted, I just hope that you also were able to meet up with the palliatives that they are required. You have done a very constructive and well-structured program according to your explanation. But I just want to ask you, you said you are planning to establish a test centers for Cross River State and Kogi State. Why are you specifying those two states?
We have been working very closely with the Federal Ministry of Health. They have, and as well as the NCDC, they are the professionals. They are the ones who have the information, they have the data. Partnership and collaboration is very critical in the way and manner Victim Support Fund manages and implements its programs. And so we have worked very, very closely with this. And it is based on the data and the advice that we got from these agencies that we targeted in these states where some of the facilities may not be available as in other places. But remember too that the needs are many all over, as I said at the beginning, and we are not able to do everything at once. And it was really about prioritization because of the inadequacy of what we saw around testing in these facilities and as guided by the appropriate ministry and agencies.
Let me also stay with you before we come back to Abuja. Abuja, you talked about the humanitarian services going on in the states, the humanitarian organizations we call Bay States, that's Bayel, Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. Can you give us an idea of what the burden of needs, by gender case?
Immediately for the pandemic, I'm unable to give you the specific data on gender, disaggregated data on gender. But like I said, the pandemic only added new dimensions to the humanitarian needs in these states. The major humanitarian crises in these states were created by the Boko Haram insurgency. And we have been there for years addressing this. And the gender dimension had been critical for us in responding to the insurgency-driven humanitarian crisis. And so, for example, the livelihood issue program and intervention of Victim Support Fund is one of the biggest portfolios that we have. And in this, we have the Women Economic Empowerment Program. This was one of the projects that was launched, one of the first projects that was launched by the Victim Support Fund. The Women Economic, we realized that because of the particular way in which the Boko Haram insurgency has attacked and affected communities, it has generated so many women-headed families now that women have become breadwinners. Men have been killed, husbands have been killed, people are displaced, and women are having to look after themselves and look after children. And so it became critical for us to respond to support these women who have to take new responsibilities of providing for families. And so the Women Economic Empowerment Program, we started by identifying first women in IDP camps. Now we are working in communities, wholly. No longer in that, because a number of the IDP camps, people have moved back to communities because of the improvement of the situation. And at the beginning, 4 years, 2015, when we started, we identified women with capacity for generating economic activities. And we started by giving them 20,000 grants. We organized them into savings and loans associations, identified CSOs that are working in those areas that we also capacitated to support these women. We organized them into savings and loans association and gave each woman 20,000 naira then. Later, because of what we saw and the success of it, we upgraded the grant to 30,000. Now we have upgraded the grant to 50,000. And beyond that, a number of the groups that did very well from the initial support that we gave them, we are organizing them into bigger community-based associations that are now being supported not as individuals, but as groups. We are identifying their capacities and upgrading the support that we are giving them. We are also working with agencies that are now helping to further build community capacity. We are working, for example, with the Industrial Training Fund, all being funded by VSF for these groups that we started with, who we have now upgraded to a certain level, working now at the community level to provide the equipment to focus on the areas that they are best at, to scale up their economic activity in many of these communities. Beyond that, we also have the animal breeding agricultural program, where a lot of households are giving animals to breed, because this is, a lot of these people were breeding animals that they lost. So women have been targeted specifically, to enhance their economic capacities and their capacity to be able to look after themselves and look after their children. Then we also developed the foster care program. A lot of children were left orphaned, we are left homeless, and if not properly taken care of, you are going to generate the next set of Boko Haram insurgents. For the Women Economic Empowerment Program, we have about 20,000 women on that program right now. For the foster care program, we have about 3,000 children on our foster care program, where we have placed in homes. And for every child that we identify and we place in homes, Victim Support Fund gives the family about 15,000 naira every month for the support, the care, and the education, feeding, and everything of these children. We give this support. It's not an open-ended support. We give this support for a period of 10 months to enable the families with these children to stabilize and be able to also start some economic activities that will be able to sustain the support to these children. So there are a lot of things we are doing, targeted at children, targeted at women, targeted at families. Our agricultural support program has also been huge, where we provide agricultural inputs, both for dry season agriculture and rain-fed agriculture. This is focused on households, not just women, but there are also a number of women beneficiaries.
Professor Sunday Ocheche, that's a very comprehensive approach to what you are doing. And I want to bring in Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu here, who is from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. I've listened to Professor Ocheche, and he read out some of the activities of his organization. And I want to ask you whether there is a kind of collaboration between your ministry and organizations such as the Victim Support Fund, because from what he has told us, if it can be as comprehensive as it is, women targeting children, the household. They're not just giving grants, they're also into agriculture, they're also into programs that can sustain the families, not just providing a short-term palliative measure, but something that can last for a longer period of time. They can now keep the families together for a longer period of time. Now, is the ministry into this kind of a comprehensive approach to humanitarian services?
Thank you very much. As the name of the ministry implies, it's Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. Now, the issues of humanitarian affairs is bringing succor and alleviating suffering. The issues of disaster management is to ensure that when disasters strike, whether man-made, whether natural disasters, that we take actions before the disasters to prevent, we take actions to manage during the disasters, and then we try to build resilience into the communities. The issues that were raised by Professor Ochochi have to do more with our other mandate of social development. Under the social development mandate, the ministry, when it was created, the National Social Investment Program was transferred, which hitherto was under the office of the Vice President, was transferred to the ministry. Under this NSIP, we have several programs that go to ensure that people move towards from reliance to self-reliance. And then, for example, we have the Empower program. The Empower program is targeted at young Nigerians, either graduates or even the ones that are not graduates but have skills. In this program, we provide grant to them over a period of ranging from 2 to 3 years. The purpose of that program is to ensure that these young people, by the time they are weaned out of the program, they have acquired skills to either employ themselves or to become very attractive to prospective employers. Right now, that program, we have already finished with Batch A, Batch B, and we're in the process of registering Batch C, which was widely publicized. Apart from the Empower program, we also have the JIP program. The JIP program, similar to what Dr. Ochochi said, is to provide financing to women, mothers who have skills, who are into small-time business, so that they grow up their business and acquire more skills. This program has also, touched the lives of thousands and thousands of Nigerians. Apart from the JIP program, we have the conditional cash transfer. The conditional cash transfer is a program where a register was hitherto, since 2016, a register, the National Social Investment Register, was designed to capture the poorest and the most vulnerable in the community. How do we arrive at this poorest and vulnerable community? We involve stakeholders like local government officials, like traditional rulers, and in some cases, it is the communities themselves that decide that even though we're a poor community, family A or family B or family C are among the poorest. When these people are identified, we give them a stipend of 5,000 each month. Hitherto, before the outbreak of the COVID, it used to be a bi-monthly payment. That means each recipient receives 10,000 at any particular time. But with the coming of the COVID, the president instructed that we should pay 2 months. So that's 20,000. And this also has touched the lives of many, some of which we have success stories of people that, moving from that program, whether it is the JIP, whether it is the conditional cash transfer, they have been able, to start businesses on their own and to support their families. I would also like to say, concerned with gender, female-led households, as a result of either deaths from the insurgency, are one group of people that we consider as vulnerable groups. Because in all honesty, culturally, economically, is the man that bears the burden. When a family have lost their breadwinner, this burden falls on the woman. We identify these households and we also give them special attention, in our giving our palliatives. Another group that we also look at is the elderly. The elderly here, we define anybody that is above 65. We also, it's when people are old, they are no longer into any productive venture. So when we are doing our interventions, we also pay special care to these people.
Do you also pay special care to people of special needs?
Exactly. In fact, in the ministry, we have a special advisor to the minister on people living with disabilities. So everything we do, like for example, there's a center in Kamajiji here around Abuja. Yes. So minister has visited such places. We have interacted, and we have received, stakeholders that have to do with people with living with disabilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I learned that one of the major impediments to humanitarian, service providers is accessing potential beneficiaries who are not within accessible areas. Specific to the school feeding program, and within this COVID-19 lockdown, most, if not most of the pupils, probably would have traveled out of their, school bases, to other parts of the country. So I'm wondering, one, what might be the financial implication of the school feeding program for your ministry, and what strategy, did you use to reach out to all of them?
Thank you very much. Like I said, in fact, we call it modified school feeding program, as opposed to the normal one, where before we meet the children in their school and feed them. But the closure of the schools, we have to modify it. That's why we call it modified school feeding program. Now, definitely, there are issues of infrastructure, issues of roads, issue of security. Today, we are celebrating the World Humanitarian Day. All the workers in the ministry and our collaborators, they qualify as humanitarian workers. When you are designing a program, you want to bring relief, but there is also the principle of do no harm. That means while doing that, you should not cause more harm. So definitely the issues of security, the issue of access are very important in designing our programs. Definitely there are areas by their nature we cannot reach. So far, what we have done, if you remember taking us backwards, there were states initially that were designated as front lines for this COVID-19. And those states were Lagos, because of the economic activity in Lagos, there was Ogun, and there was FCT. So in all honesty, when we did the first program of the school feeding, we paid emphasis on these schools, on these 3 states. And right now, I can tell you, it is those 3 states that we have done the modified school feeding. But looking at what has been done in other countries, not only in Nigeria, because this modified school feeding was still done in countries like the UK, in South Africa, for example, I can name schools who also arrived at the conclusion that was arrived at Nigeria, which is there are still children that need their dietary supplements.
I'm asking this specifically just for purposes of clarification.
Yes.
So that we know, because it all falls within the ambit of humanitarian services.
Exactly.
For children, who would require the nutritional feeds that you give.
Yes.
So how much of those children were you able to reach within this period? And what was the cost, cost implication for that?
Okay. In terms of cost implication, what we were providing the children, each school child of primary 1 to 3, remember, it's not even everybody, it's primary 1 to 3. Any family that has a child of primary 1 to 3 is entitled to a food package. What is contained in that food package? We have eggs, we have rice, we have some condiments that are there. And the cost of each package comes to about 4,000 naira. 4,000 naira. Now, over this in Ogun, in Lagos, and FCT, where we have done, I really don't have the exact number of figures we've reached, but I can tell you that these programs were carried out, and also for, in all transparency. How do we mean by transparency? Wherever we are carrying these things, we align with the school teachers, with the parents teachers associations, the ICPC, EFCC, and civil society organizations. They follow everywhere to track these programs we are doing. Right now, like I said, these 3 states being recognized earlier as front lines. Of course, COVID has spread now to almost every state. But that was the beginning. And since it was a modified program, it was a pilot program, we wanted to try with these 3 states to see the challenges, and certainly some lessons have come back to us.
Have you escalated it to the more than 20 states now?
That is the next stage we are going, because state governments are now writing to us to be included also in the program. So the plan of the ministry is to upscale this program, building from the lesson, because nothing you can do for the first time. Definitely there are lessons. Not everything will work as planned. So we have drawn lessons from these 3 states, and now we are working based on those lessons. Because again, I have to explain that in the school feeding program, there is no way you can carry such a program without the cooperation of the state of the state governments. So honest, we are building more and more liaison because there are aspects that they have to do and there are aspects that the ministry has to do.
So as things are now, you are yet to cover up to 20 states of Nigeria.
No, we are yet to cover. We've covered 3 states.
But the program is still very much on.
It's still very much on. The only thing now you see, there is this dilemma, will schools open? Will schools not open? If schools open, because like I said, this is a program that is going on to 2016. If schools open, we'll revert to the normal feeding program. If unfortunately, you know, the COVID lockdown continues and schools are not open, then we'll continue with this modified school feeding, which I've tried in 3 states.
All right, thank you. Let's come to our Rotary guest here. You know, you have this Rotary theme, you know, is it beneficial to all concerned? And I know the way you operate in a very structured manner. You have your districts, right? You know, I know in Abuja, you may have up to more than 1 or 2, as the case may be. Now, is there any coordination between the Rotary districts, you know, in Abuja, for instance? And if there is, how do you coordinate your humanitarian activities vis-a-vis COVID-19? Is there any value addition to what you used to do? Because we know Rotary as an organization that is interested in, for instance, polio eradication and some other health issues. But this time around, we're looking at something that's more comprehensive now, you know, globally speaking. And today that we're observing Humanitarian Day 2020, can you tell us any value addition to what you used to do, and whether you have a kind of a coordination between different districts of Rotary Club International, and again, what is happening in other parts of the country?
Okay, thank you very much. Before I go to your point, I just want to implore Group Captain, you know, like she rightly said, that they need to try and collaborate with so many of organizations that are intervening and supporting government, like the Victim Support Group. You know, you can see what they have rolled out. These are basically all the things we do as well, you know, that people don't realize that is being done to support government. So I think there must be a proper collaborations with all humanitarian service clubs, organizations in Nigeria, with the ministry, so that we can be able to help support and also increase the interventions that we do. In Rotary, we have so much structures. Like you said, in Abuja, we have what we call clubs, Rotary clubs. In Abuja, we have about 43 clubs. And those clubs are supervised by districts. And that is where I'm going to be district governor in the year 2021-2022. That district covers 23 states and FCT in Nigeria. In Nigeria, we have 4 districts. My district, District 9125, covers 23 states of all the northern states, including all the southwest states, except Ogun and Lagos. We have a district in Lagos which covers Ogun and Lagos. We have another district which covers the 5 south states and also the eastern states. So we have 4 districts in Nigeria. During the COVID-19 pandemic, all the districts in Nigeria, which is 4, we raised a total of about $100,000 that we used to intervene in the COVID-19 palliative to support government, which were used to provide palliatives to households, which were used to support the various state government initiatives on task force, you know, by providing face masks, medical equipment for frontline workers, which we are always supporting at every point in time. So from all these clubs, the district coordinates such activities. Like, for instance, we get information from clubs. If the capacity is not enough for them to be able to carry out this intervention, then they escalate to the district, which district now collates all the clubs in the district to be able to carry out that intervention. For instance, we had a news in Ijabisa, in Buhari local government, that they don't have water, the wives were leaving their husbands, and the district governor, you know, thought it was that let's go and visit that committee and find out why they don't have water, you know. And we went there, and to tell you, we are going to start digging a borehole in the next couple of days.
How do you identify potential beneficiaries? Do you just, since you're not yet collaborating with the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, do you just cast your net and whoever it catches becomes a beneficiary.
Not exactly. We do community needs assessments, and this community needs assessment is done by the various clubs. The clubs are located in different communities. Like, for instance, the Jabisa that I was talking about, we had clubs in Kubwa, which is near the Buhari local government. So they get informations about needs that are expected from each community. So they go to the community, they ask them, you know, we heard about this. Is this what you want? What can we do? How can we intervene? You know, what has government done? Where has government reached? You know, so that we don't duplicate what government has done, but we try to support whatever government has done. Like, for instance, they might come up and say there's a primary health center in one of these local government areas that is dilapidated. We can always go there and say, okay, let's rehabilitate it, but we would involve the government. We don't do things without the government. We let them know that, you know, maybe, for instance, we have to go to the FCT health sector and tell them that there's a need here that's been brought to us. We want to do a rehabilitation of this primary health center and also support. Then they'll give us the go-ahead. Then we go ahead. So we do community needs assessments, and these clubs are located in all these communities, bring the information, you know, for us to now be able to intervene. When the cost implications is larger than what the club can do, they bring it to the districts. And like he said, there's grants. We can get global grants from Rotary International, and we can get as much as 30,000 to 100
that's an area we would speak to once we come back from this very short break, Kiran. This is Good Morning Nigeria. We're having an interesting, extremely interesting conversation on this very important day as well. It's World Humanitarian Day. We'll be right back. Don't go away, please.
She cries. She cries in anguish and in pain. She bears the scourge of her grief. She toils in vain for justice and succumbs to silence. He gloats over his malady. Like a beast, he pounces with no remorse. Her cry means nothing. Her pain feeds her shame. Like an orphan, she's left to grieve in solitude. But no more will she cry in vain. Her adversaries will henceforth bear the brunt of their cruelty. Rape is evil. Rape is a plague, a pandemic of monumental consequences. We must unite and kick it out of our society.
Connect with NTA and stand against rape and rapists. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 2255 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
All right, we thank you for staying with us up to this moment on Good Morning Nigeria. At this point, we'd like to return to Professor Ochoche. Professor Ochoche, you have indeed made this program a very exciting one, and by reeling out a good number of programs and activities that you are engaged in, which is so pervasive and has actually touched the lives of many people who are in need in different parts of the country, especially in the northern part of Nigeria. But one may be wondering as to how do you raise your funding? How do you get funding for all of the things you are doing? Because I know that the federal government actually doled out some money money for palliative during this pandemic. I'm not sure you benefited from that. We want to know the source of your funding. And again, do you have a monitoring mechanism in which to evaluate some of the activities that you undertake? Because you are so specific about the things that you have achieved. But one would also like to know whether you really have a kind of a monitoring mechanism to further authenticate, some of the things you told us that your establishment is doing across Nigeria.
Thank you so much, sir. First, the issue of the source of our funding. Let me say that we are a private sector-led initiative in partnership with the federal government. As for the history of the Victim Support Fund, you'll recall that sometime in 2014, under President Goodluck Jonathan, at the height of the Boko Haram crisis, when the humanitarian crisis were reaching a point that government alone could not effectively manage, the president invited the private sector under the leadership of General T.Y. Danjuma to help support the efforts of the government. And the group, the team, the committee under General Danjuma was tasked with raising the money, first and foremost, of raising the money, of identifying who the victims were, of identifying how they have been affected, determining what type of support they required, and administering the support. And so they carried out a fundraiser during which, like you said, yes, government made a donation, a one-off donation to the committee. The Victim Support Fund is not a government agency. Like I said, we are a private sector-led initiative in partnership with the federal government. So we are not on the national appropriation. We do not receive funding. Apart from the initial donation at the beginning from the government, there has been no other fund from the government. So the bulk of the funding of the Victim Support Fund has come from corporate and individual Nigerians. And the funds that were raised then is what General Danjuma and his team have been managing. Of course, it's made up of some of the most astute businessmen and men and women of great integrity, and that all those elements they have brought to bear in the management of these funds. I, as the executive director, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the Victim Support Fund. But the strategic management of the funds and the assets of Victim Support Fund remains with General Danjuma and his team, and they keep close watch and managing it in such a way that it is able to provide sustainability for us to where we are and still for some time to go. No, we did not receive anything from the federal government pandemic fund. No, we have not received anything. If anything, we have now come in, even though, it was not initially part of what we are doing, but because of the dynamics of the situation and the call by Mr. President to all to join hands to fight this pandemic, our chairman saw it fit to set up a special intervention for COVID-19. So that is, our funding has come from the donations of Nigerians, corporate and individual, as well as what the government gave at the beginning in 2014. As for monitoring, like I said, the committee under the chairmanship of General Danjuma has been very firm in ensuring that every kobo that Nigerians gave is used adequately, that it is used appropriately. We have in place a very robust monitoring and evaluation unit that ensures that all that we do is effectively monitored. But also the committee on yearly basis appoints external consultants that goes around to evaluate what we do and make appropriate recommendations on how to manage the process.
Okay,
We are engaged.
Prof, thank you. Prof, thank you. Let me bring in Captain Sadiq here. Captain, I'm wondering what's the connection, what's the nexus between your ministry and the Victim Support Fund? Initially, we used to have the presidential initiative on the Northeast victims and all that. What's the nexus?
Well, permit me to say that the history of Victim Support Fund, PCNI, all predates the establishment of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. So there's a historical link, actually, between Professor Ochoche's Victim Support Fund and the now Northeast Development Commission. At the initial stage, there was the Presidential Commission on Northeast Initiative, PCNI, under which Victim Support Fund was a part. It was that PCNI, after the passage of a bill, that now became Northeast Development Commission. But government, its wisdom, you know, I think Victim Support Fund retained its own identity as an independent, while the NEDC, which was given birth from PCNI, is now under the ministry. So again, with terms of stakeholders, in all honesty, the first thing that the minister did on assuming is to map out all the stakeholders in the humanitarian district. Okay, it's possible sometimes some have slipped through the crack, we didn't catch them, but the door of the minister is always open, you know, to stakeholders, whether governmental or non-governmental, private organizations. I can assure you that there's hardly any week that goes by that we do not receive stakeholders. But then again, you can never have too many stakeholders. So of course, maybe this is part of the conversation we're even having.
Now that you've talked about you know, stakeholders and interest groups, and you know, we've had a lot of issues, you know, around the credibility of some of the humanitarian, you know, offices, the NGOs and all that. And the issues have always been on the question of, you know, credibility and motive. How are you handling that now? Do we still have such concerns?
Well, in all honesty, you see, when you look at the work of a ministry like Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, the humanitarian environment is full of so many actors. You have the humanitarians themselves, you have development partners, you also have government agencies, like we represent the government, even though we're doing a humanitarian duty. You also have even security agencies. So the ministry is, one of the ministry role is to coordinate all these, you know, actors within the, you know, within the Nigerian space. So definitely, you know, we invite all people and stakeholders. Another good thing that the minister did after the ministry was barely 3 months old when the minister convened a stakeholders meeting, which is called a Civil Security Coordination Dialogue in Maiduguri. That's in November. There, all these agencies that I mentioned, all these agencies, whether private, whether international NGOs, whether local NGOs, whether UN agencies, and even private partners, because there are separated, you know, private individuals who want to also, you know, assist the government. This meeting was there, and from there, we were happy for the first time to have the National Humanitarian Coordination Committee, which is a high-level committee, you know, which was inaugurated by President Muhammadu Buhari, so that if we have issues, definitely the security man has his concerns, the humanitarian man has his concerns. Sometimes it is not always. They may not see eye to eye. But then the role of the ministry is to bring this thing before this high-level, you know, body to make sure that if it is issues of credibility, there are agencies that vet the credibilities. When an agency comes, it wants to work. It has to go through EFCC. It has to go through Ministry of Budget and National Planning. It has to go through Office of the National Security Advisor. But what we are having in place now to simplify this registration process is that all these agencies are linked to a desk at the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, so that in the first place, we don't unnecessarily put cumbersome, you know, restrictions on people who want to help us. But at the same time also, take care of the security concerns, so that the issue of credibility, you said, because in all honesty, there are diverse NGOs, there are diverse organizations. Yes. Some have humanitarian motives, some could have other motives. It is the work of the ministry to ensure that the credible humanitarian NGOs are allowed space to operate, while at the same time protecting national and security interests.
Well, that's a very interesting question that Claire put to you, because we recall vividly that during the era of humanitarian organizations, you know, for the northeast of Nigeria, we had so many of them. Some are not credible, and some were credible, as the case may be. And then there are also conflicts among humanitarian organizations in the northeast of Nigeria then, which have culminated into, you know, so many arguments and conflicts and even security concerns. Now, let's talk about security of humanitarian personnel who are operating in the northeast and elsewhere in Nigeria. Is there any coordinated security arrangement for these humanitarian personnel who are working? We recall, you know, in your opening speech that some of them, you know, a few of them were executed by Boko Haram, and one would be wondering if there were a good security apparatus set for humanitarians in that part of the country, that such would have been averted. So, as it is presently, is there any well-coordinated security arrangement put in place to guide, you know, some of the persons who are humanitarian providers?
First, yes, I will say that there are mechanisms to ensure protection of humanitarian workers who are also risking their life, but to reduce the risk. Now, these mechanisms include legal instruments. Nigeria as a country, for example, is a member of several international organizations like the United Nations. Nigeria also as a country has signed many treaties and conventions that have allusion to providing security. For example, under the Geneva Conventions, Additional Protocol 1, there is a requirement to protect humanitarian workers. There is also a treaty on the safety of UN and allied personnel, which Nigeria has signed, under which any country that has signed that is supposed to provide security for humanitarian workers, their accommodation, and even their means of transport. Apart from that, there is also the duty as a sovereign nation. Anybody, whether NGO, any person who happens to be under the territory of Nigeria, Nigeria has a duty to ensure the protection of safety of the state. So what we do in the ministry is to ensure that we constantly remind all the stakeholders the duty on the security forces to protect these people, and also on the other hand, for the humanitarian NGOs to operate strictly under the guidance of good humanitarian donorship, the principles of humanitarian action like humanity, independence, while at the same time also reminding them that the country as a sovereign nation, there are issues of which under security a country might decide to do. But what we always advocate, you understand, is to make sure that the humanitarian has the humanitarian space to operate, and also the security people have also their, you know, their digital. It's not an easy thing. It's a balancing. Yes,
but sometimes the security Kiran is talking about is not even security, you know, injury from, you know, state actors. It is actually injuries from non-state actor groups, you know, who attack, you know, even humanitarian shelters at random. But let's pause you for a while and take our tweets. We've got quite a number of tweets that are responding to you know, your contributions this morning. Kiran?
Yeah, let's begin with Mutana Farouk. He says, President Buhari's administration has tremendously invested in humanitarian services, likewise some private sectors and individuals. However, the impact of all that is not much felt because of the high level of poverty in the country. They should focus more on empowerment. And
Akeju or Lagbajo tweets, all over the world, the response to humanitarian crises are driven by non-governmental organizations along a response plan that fits into human capital development of a nation.
Akimbo Wafesta says, my heart hurts when humanitarian and aid workers are senselessly targeted and killed in the line of duty. Government must provide adequate security for humanitarian and aid workers and do more to tackle the humanitarian crisis than litter our country.
Okay, this one is from Ocho Ogbaji, Good Friday. The problem we are facing in this country is corruption and tribalism. Most of the people that need humanitarian assistance don't get. Some regions are neglected as if they are not part of this country. The ministry involved should please try to do more.
R.C. Priestley, managing information during a humanitarian emergency, gathering reliable data on the locations of people in need, what they urgently need, what is best placed to assist them, getting assistance to people in need in a form that is useful and timely, increasing donation funding, I didn't get it. But he said, okay, it has always influenced the political economy of the country and has always been influenced by the political considerations of donors. Humanitarian services have never been disbursed solely on the basis of need.
Okay, Dele Jack Solomon, immediate humanitarian needs and longer-term development and reconstruction assistance to rebuild the affected places. This will include granting access to and facilitating independent local and international reporting and assessments. All right, thank you. Those are your tweets.
Claire,
yes.
let me return to Professor Olchoche this time around. Professor Olchoche, I want you to do an assessment, of all the humanitarian services in Nigeria. Well, taking your own victim support fund as a case in point, I also believe that you also have an eye on what other humanitarian services are doing, and of course the role the ministry is also playing. So what is your assessment of how these services are coordinated in Nigeria? And again, has there been any value added based on the fact that we now have the issue of COVID-19 added to the existing humanitarian issues that we've had in the country before the emergence of COVID-19?
Thank you so much, sir. Can I begin first by correcting one of the points raised by Group Captain Sadiq on the relationship between Victim Support Fund and PCNI? There's the Presidential Committee on Northeast Initiative. Victim Support Fund has never been part or a unit of PCNI. Like I said, VSF was created in 2014. PCNI was created in 2016. And as a matter of fact, it was created largely on the advice of VSF. And the creation of PCNI was in fact funded by VSF. VSF became a member of the PCNI committee because of the nature of the work that we do. So we have never been a unit or a component of PCNI. We worked very closely with PCNI. PCNI was a government agency, which brings me to your question, sir, because when we commenced operation, we realized that the area of coordination was very weak. And given the challenge of humanitarian crisis that we had in Nigeria, so many actors were in the field. People were doing different things. We are colliding over each other in some places, especially in the IDP camps. It was a lot easier for many of them to get the photo ops. There appeared to be a little bit more organization in the camps, and everybody was falling over each other there. There were so many other names. People were in the same places, whether in education or the provision of food, and so on and so forth. And everywhere in the world, best practice and what we know, coordination of humanitarian activity is the responsibility of government, is the responsibility of the state. And that was why we believed then that there was a lacuna. There was a gap that needed to be filled in the area of coordination. And the emergence of PCNI was informed largely by that need to have an agency that will coordinate everybody, including VSF. Yes, they were coordinating us, but we are never a part or a unit of VSF. And that is why, coming now to the issue of coordination, we have so many actors, like I said, international actors, international NGOs, international governmental organizations as well. We have many national actors. And coordination in situations like this becomes very, very, very important. It becomes very critical. And the ministry right now has that responsibility, including taking on what PCNI had for the Northeast, which is now largely being handled by the Northeast Development Commission in that regard. Even in this pandemic, VSF has received invitation from the ministry, for the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, indicating their areas of interest and concern and where VSF could help support. As a matter of fact, some of the states that I listed where we have intervened with support for the pandemic was informed by the letter to VSF by the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, that these are some of the major states of need. Yeah. And it will be useful that VSF can also support or join them as we work together. Right. So that is an indication of the level of coordination the ministry is doing and how we are collaborating with them in the work that we are doing.
Prof, thank you. Thank you. Let me quickly come back to the studio, just less than 60 seconds from each. And I just would like to again ask you before Mr. Oyedekun would respond. Would you say that our country response to our humanitarian needs have been specific to the underlying issues rather than, addressing the periphery, the signs, the symptoms?
The fact is that the COVID-19 is upon us. So in government, in responding has to do both the immediate response of addressing what is happening and then at the same time not shying away from what were the underlying causes. The COVID response brought immediate needs. Definitely the government has to act the immediate needs. Pari passu with that, we also have to continue looking at what were the causes of this something so that for future...
Yes, so far, have we been able to address both the causes and the symptoms and the immediate impact?
Well, I would say, in my personal opinion, I think right now what we are doing is addressing the symptoms. Until we have the COVID-19 is over, of course, we are taking lessons of what led to where we are now.
Okay, what do you think?
Well, in my own opinion, I would say that we are still paying lip service on the root cause of what is affecting humanitarian services. And the more we're able to deeper into addressing that cause, the less of whatever interventions that we'll need. Poverty still prevails, political unrest still prevails, banditry still prevails, and that is an education and mediation that we need to come into to ensure that we prevent such from escalating so that we will not have humanitarian crisis in our hands.
Well, it is historical that humanitarian crisis will never come to an end. I mean, it has always been there globally, right? So, of course, there are causes, symptoms, and what have you. But what is important is that we are responding to what we have as the immediate one that we have.
But Kieran, sometimes it does end because crisis more pressing needs in other parts of
If you're talking about ending, we're talking about Western world. We are more developed than others. They still have such crises, humanitarian crisis. That's why we have Red Cross and what have you elsewhere across the globe. Yeah. Right? So, gentlemen, it's been wonderful, talking to you this morning. It's been a robust conversation. And first of all, let us appreciate Victim Support Fund Executive Director, Professor Sunday Ochoche. Professor Ochoche, we appreciate you for the insights you brought into the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and of course, the Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu, the Technical Advisor to the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. It's also been great hearing from you this morning. Of course, let us know that your ministry is just 1 year old and you're already grappling with the many issues of humanitarian affairs. Thank you for coming.
Day after tomorrow, please, our anniversary, we invite NTA to be part of that.
Okay. And Ayo Oyedeku, District Governor-elect, Rotary International District 9125, Abuja. We thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Now, at this point, let's take some sports news before we round off today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria.
Arsenal have signed former Huddersfield Town youngster Tim Akinola after reportedly only seeing him play on video. Akinola was released by Huddersfield last month, but according to The Athletic, he has put pen to paper and will join the Gunners under 23s despite not having a trial. Arsenal are looking to sign more development players aged between 18 and 21 who will be able to strengthen their academy before going on to break into the first team. Akinola becomes the club's latest addition, following 20-year-old winger George Lewis, who the Gunners signed from third-tier Norwegian side Framlavik. Meanwhile, FIFA is joining forces with the African Union AU, the World Health Organization WHO, and the Confederation of African Football CAF to jointly address the issue of domestic violence by launching the #SafeHome campaign across the African continent. The initiative is designed to support women and children victims of domestic violence, particularly as stay-at-home measures in response to COVID-19 have put them at greater risk. A number of African football stars are supporting the campaign via video awareness messages distributed on social and traditional media.
Hi, I'm Asato Shoala. If you're at risk of violence in your home, don't blame yourself. you have the right to look for help and protection.
The African Union FIFA-CAF Memorandum of Understanding, which was concluded in February 2019, covers joint campaigns on topics of mutual interest and the promotion of gender equality, a key principle.
All right, that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. I hope you found our conversation quite engaging. I did, and I'm sure Kieran did as well. We'd love to appreciate our guests once more. And of course, to the second set of tweets that came in, we couldn't take all of you, Dan Ladi and a whole lot of others. So from me, Claire Delabo Abdurazak, to have a great day.
Yeah, and I'm Kieran Umayo. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow on the same platform.